Okay, so my name's Guy Swift. I'm a lead solution architect with the EM with Sensedia in Europe, Middle East and Africa section, which is here mainly. So, and I'm here to talk to you about what we've done for open finance solution specifically, and thus demonstrate how to build APIs and how to build an API ecosystem that will do the open banking standard. So I just wanted, while you're here, how many of you actually built or been involved in building APIs that will for the standard in the UK, or indeed you have? Anybody else? No? So you probably know more about this than me, I suspect. At least you probably know. Sorry.
Is no longer. That's a new name. It's a consortium of a lot of different people.
I meant, yeah, more about this than I do. Anyway.
Are not as welcome as they were before. That's political.
Anyway, so it is not a trivial thing to do to build an open banking module. So I think, as I'll probably try and show you. So this company is Sensedia. I'll just introduce the company as a whole. We are based in Brazil. We've been going for 15 years. There's 850 of us. Most of them are in Brazil. We have industry recognition from Forrester as a leader, which has recently been granted to us. We also have many quite well-known clients, not just in banking, but also in health, transport, retail, and other verticals. So we spread quite widely in Latin America, and now we're launching and having some success in this part of the world and North America as well. So that's Sensedia. We also run a conference similar to this one, but it's much bigger, which is based obviously in the home country, in Brazil itself. So in terms of the macroeconomics that we have at the moment, it comes as no surprise to any of you, I'm sure, that the three major problems we have are the geopolitical instability and the conflicts. We have a land war in Europe for the first time in nearly 80 years. We have volatile energy prices, which is clearly a corollary of the same sort of thing, and inflation caused by quantitative easing, which is printing a lot of money, and that's because of the COVID mainly. But that's given us, an economic environment that is quite a struggle for a lot of people. So, and socially, that's going to cause some problems. But we're not here to talk about that. We'll narrow it down to what that has actually affected the financial markets, because we're not really talking about the social effects of those things. And what's happened here is it's caused digital payments to balloon and to massively increase, because they're much more efficient than doing it the old-fashioned way with cash and other things. Handling cash is a very expensive thing to do, because you need people with guns and big cars and armored cars and things like that. With payments over the internet, you don't need any of that. So as you can see, the growth is going to be around 30% in the next couple of years, up to about 2.5 trillion in terms of payments. So that's the landscape. And what I found personally, living in Germany, is that prior to COVID, Aldi, which is, everybody knows Aldi, didn't take credit cards, MasterCard or Visa. They only took cash, or a German thing called an EC card, which is unique to Germany. It's issued by the bank. It's like a debit card. But now they take MasterCard, as do almost all the supermarkets. So, which is a good thing. So every cloud has a silver lining. Right. So next, in terms of that payment stuff, we've got a bunch of use cases which we've seen in terms of growth and coming to fruition during the last few years. It's particularly wallets, digital payment wallets. Most people use those sorts of things. A lot of people have Google Pay and Apple Pay and that kind of thing. The QR code payments in Brazil specifically has one. Pix uses QR codes. Buy now, pay later. In Germany we have Klarna, and here I think is also Klarna. There are some other local ones which I can't name, because I don't use that service. Real-time payments, clearly that's obviously taken off. SEPA payments has improved. It's now, you can do a SEPA payment and it will happen within a few minutes if the bank enables it, which is very impressive. In fact, we've had it in Australia as well for many years, but still. And variable recurring payments is the new kid on the block. That's just been released, I believe, as a standard in the UK banking area. So now we can see that, where people can make variable amounts of payments for different for their services. So these are all going to fuel the growth of payments in open banking. So to address that, we have a product set which is obviously doesn't just do banking, it does the other verticals as I mentioned earlier. In this case, the core product is the API management platform, which has a design time and a runtime engine, which can be deployed on the cloud or on premise if you wish. And surrounding that, we have the analytics tool to tell you what the APIs are actually doing. And we have the governance tool so that you can manage the quality of the APIs that you release. I'm not going to go into detail with that. If you want a product demonstration, we can do that later. And we have something called Flexible Actions, which is a module that introspects the API payload or the header, and will act on that and issue a mail or a Slack message or go into Teams, depending on what you set up, based on a business rule you want to do, or maybe it's the traffic is too high based on your requirement, and you can take some action on that. It also will generate a webhook, so you can use it for workflow tooling things as well. So surrounding that, you've got the Events Hub and Service Mesh, in case you want to do some event-driven architecture. And obviously, we built the module for open solutions, which includes the open banking piece. All right. We also, as I said, we have the platform, which provides those APIs at a high quality with the eventing and the microservices can be delivered there. On top of that, we've built open banking, open insurance coming, and then obviously OpenX, meaning health and other verticals where the open data is a concept that is being realized. I think banking is obviously ahead of the game. Insurance is coming down the track, as you know. And then after that, health, I think, seems to be one of the... Energy is also being talked about. And then on top of that, we have a consulting service, which is probably which is me some of the time, not all the time. You should be pleased to hear. And that does some of the consulting service to help you decide what APIs to build, why you want to build them, and how to productize them, which is the key part. I mean, a lot of people start building APIs, as you know, using software they found on the internet, on GitHub, which is fine. But then after they build 100 of them, and with different development teams, it becomes a bit of a nightmare. And we hear this from people coming to our booth quite regularly. We've got all these APIs, but we don't know how to manage them. And now I don't sleep at night because sometimes they don't work. So our product is designed to stop that problem from happening. And I would strongly advise you to use it if you have that problem. We also have the usual sort of customer success and API care, so we can monitor the things properly for you if that's a service you wish to use. So you will be warned, you will know if things are going to go wrong, and we can fix it before it gets too bad. Right. So let's have a look at the business visions, what we've done. So obviously there's two standards prevalent in Europe at the moment. You've got the one in the UK and the Berlin Group, which is, as you probably know, a bunch of banks in Europe, not all of them in Germany, about 50 I think, have come together and produced a standard which is similar to the UK one. The difference being that the Berlin Group has done fewer services, shall I say, than the UK one, with specifically not having completed the open data service set, because the standard is not complete. They do payments and account information. So this is the UK set. in more detail. Account information and payments are pretty self-explanatory. You can initiate payments and schedule payments and things like that. And now, obviously, you get your variable recurring payments coming in there as well. Account information, the standard stuff about accounts, your balances, your transactions, the beneficiaries and statements, which is just a list of transactions. But we also have in the UK personal current accounts and the business account and things like that, which include the things like fees, the features and benefits, and all the metadata that around an account that is not necessarily purely about the transactions, which is useful if you want to build a full service. Open, as it said, Berlin Group does the similar stuff in regard to payments and account information, but has omitted so far the data services that I mentioned just now. So it's not bad, but it's it's a work in progress. In fact, this open banking, let me just check this, that doesn't make sense. Okay, sorry, that one's gone out of order. That's weird. Okay, so what we have in our platform is, this is the platform, which is the one at the bottom here. And it contains the elements that I said, including the API gateway and the event processing and flexible actions. And then on top of that, it does those features, the scalability, and all that, the connection and the transformation. And then the Open Finance module has two major components, the consent management and the authorization piece. The authorization piece it uses OAuth2 authorization, as it says on the left side, and we've got a piece for Berlin Group, and I think open banking is available real soon now, so it's coming down. So in summary, so what happens when a PSU or somebody wants to a user wants to get some information from one of their banking partners or banking bankers, they send a message into our platform to request this. So, and it uses these modules here to extract the data from the third party. And first of all, it has to do the discovery for the TPP to make sure it's valid, the dynamic client registration, and then it does the authorization of the client, then it does the token management, and then it does the consent. So I've got, let me see what I've got here. Oh, here we are. This is in a bit more detail. As you can see, the PSU is omitted from this, so this assumes that the person has already sent a request to the TPP. So first of all, it does the dynamic client registration, and that then gets and then it gets the information for that. It starts the information to get that. Then it gets OAuth2 authorization, and then it gets the code for that, and then it needs to get the token, and it gets that. And then it calls the API to get the consent, and that goes down, and it checks that the authorization is valid, and then it gets the information from the consent engine, and then it comes back. So these are a number of calls that it makes. And I think what happened, let me just get this one back, it's moved. Yeah, that's the complete flow, which is, as I said to Tony, it's fiendishly complicated. It really is fiendishly complicated. There's a lot of calls in here. And if anybody has, the gentleman over there said, building the stuff has probably seen this kind of thing. So that's why you don't want to build open banking API with a team of disparate developers doing things by themselves. You need a governance tool to build something that will work reliably 24/7, 365, or you will not sleep at night. I'll tell you now. I would be really I really wouldn't want to do it that way. So, now, once you've got that, then you can the developers can concentrate on building business rules and APIs that do cool stuff. But they want that's the plumbing. Get that right, and you can build good stuff on top of it. Get that wrong, you're just going to be in a world of pain. So that's in a nutshell. That is it. So now what we need to do now is I'll show you what it actually is. So I shall come over here to the platform itself, and I shall log in, hopefully. There we go. So this is what you get when you log in. There's a dashboard which tells you what's happening. You can tailor this whichever way you want, obviously. And there's a catalog here of the APIs that have been built. This is a test system, so they're not all relevant to us. So I shall select Berlin Group. And this set is a subset, actually, it's not the complete set, of there's 12 of them, and they do those things that on the diagram in the slide pack. That's what they do. And I can just show you, just to give you a flavor of it, if we look at this one, for example. You have here the basic API information on this screen, and you're moving down here. We're looking at the environment that it's running in. It's running in that one, which is one of the test environment, basically. And then you can look at the, whoops, sorry, I didn't do that right. Go down a bit more. I meant to go to the flow. There we go. The result, let's have a look at this one. That's not right. Just a minute. Go cancel. What's happening? Let's go down to the flow. That one. Sorry, this one here. So this is the picture of what's been built to get this to work, and these are all. We call these interceptors. There's different types of interceptors you can put in, and this is these are the traffic ones, which does things to do with the actual quantity and quality payload itself. So you can do payload size. You can set it up to handle only a certain size. You can do rate limiting. You can restrict access. You can send spike arrest to stop people sending massive amounts through in a sudden burst. And in this case, we have got the security ones, which you can bring up, which are different, all to do with the different types of security you can put in, OAuth being an obvious example. You've got mediation, tracing, transformation. If you have some SOAP messages from your old banking systems to try and transform into JSON, and so on, basically. It's quite a lot of stuff. So in this particular flow, we have these components, of which the little bug thing there is the logging. So it logs it at each stage, just in case. I guess this is a test system, so you probably wouldn't put all this logging into a production system, to be honest. But having said that, it's useful if you're developing it. You've got a header which injects extra header parameters into the header. This is a JavaScript component, and if you click on this, you can see the JavaScript code. I'm not going to try and read it to you, but just suffice to say, there seems to be an awful lot of it, considering this is just to get somebody's banking information. There's a lot of stuff here. Anyway, so there's several of these. Whoops, I've done it's not so, let me see if I can get rid of that. Good. There's quite a lot of, as you can see, there's quite a few, there's 4 or 5, well actually there's precisely 4 Java modules, JavaScript components in this, which have different functions. And that is kind of the key, the heart of it. And that, as you can see, there's quite a lot of work's gone into building this stuff. It's not something that's being knocked up over a weekend. So so that's the sort of the background in terms of what we have built. As I said, there's all those APIs that do the functions of open banking, to the underlying infrastructure pieces that give you the authorization, the tokens, the consent, etc. And then, so it's all done. Right. So the next step is to actually use this one. Okay. So in this case, we can simulate generating the tokens and generating access tokens and consent. So and the way that we do this is obviously we send a test message in using Postman, which is a good product for this kind of thing. And in fact, I shall get consent status first so we can see what it is in. And what's happened is it's not active because we haven't started yet. So there's no consent available for us to do anything at the moment. So what we need to do is generate a token, which was, if you remember from the diagram, was one of the first steps. So we send that in, and it will get, that's the token, and it lasts 599 seconds, which is about 10 minutes. So you've got 10 minutes to complete this process, which is plenty of time. So having said that, we can look at the status again, if you like, and see if it is any different, and it probably is not. It's been terminated. So because it's not been, in the sense that there's no consent yet. So now we've done that, we need to create the consent. So that's created the consent, and it's generated all this traffic. Yeah, and then, so if we look at the status this time, that one, okay, consent status. It's received, but it's not approved yet because we haven't done the strong customer authentication. We've only done the consent at that level. So now we need to get the SCA. So we can send that in, and that's another step. Oh, right, and that's started. So, and then we can. Now all we've done is started it, so we need to update it, which is the next step. And that's received a 200 message, so that looks good. So now if we get this consent message, you should see it's received. Oh, sorry, I need to do this one. And now I need to approve it. We still received, we haven't approved yet. Right, so that received a 204, which should be okay. Let's have a look. Let's try again. What is that? Valid. So it's now approved this strong customer authentication. It's gone through the process and it's done it. So if you now you can now revoke it, which means the TPP's decided that it doesn't like you anymore, so it's not valid. And then what that happens now is you get from the consent status, you'll get a terminated message like that. So it's been terminated by the TPP. So that's just a flavour of how you get the set of messages to work to talk between the consent, the TPP, the dynamic client registration, the OAuth part piece that does the authorization, the authentication of the client, and the consent engine itself that generates the consent based on the client's having given consent to the bank that they're allowed to do that piece. So that's pretty much it, I guess, in terms of what we've got there. So have we got any questions on that from?
What's your opinion on PSD3? Why, when, and moving forward into the world of identity?
I don't know about why, when, or why, actually. Although, in fact, I'm sure it's required. Identity, in terms of electronic identity for...
it seems like digital identity becomes an imperative when all of the customer stuff is in this API world. And the governments don't seem to understand it. Maybe Europe does, but I'm sure this country doesn't.
Well, in Germany, we have digital identity in process. In fact...
in many markets.
Yeah, and Nordics are also very advanced in that. I went to a lecture from a company that specialises in this area in the Nordics, and they have got it. So we just, I mean, the French I'm not sure, to be honest, but I know Germany and the Nordics, or certainly the Scandinavian countries, are very much on top of this electronic identification. With the card, my card, my German residence card it's got a, you can read it with your mobile phone basically. Oh, I can't remember. NCR, is it the technology that does that? And yeah, you can read it with the phone and it will tell you what it is. So the technology exists in the card and it hasn't been fully implemented in the, but they're now issuing cards with electronic identity built in. And you can register with the card certain things.
If open banking is supposed to empower choice and flexibility and put the customer in the middle and all that.
Well, work in the Nordic
this
countries.
Market, it seems like privacy come before identity, and then identity should be the driver.
Yeah, I think there's reticence, just to elaborate on that, I think certainly in the UK, there's reticence to have your privacy taken in terms of a digital identity.
Yes, that's always been true in the UK.
Yeah, it's always been something very close to an Englishman's heart, and even when, and I'm harking back now to the 1980s when Margaret Thatcher imposed something called the poll tax, which was just a different way of charging the rent you pay on a house or on the land you own. There were riots in the UK because people didn't want to have that imposition put upon them. And I think to have a digital identity in the UK, where there are so many mixed cultures and nationalities who maybe wouldn't want to have their identity digitised, I think that could be a barrier to open banking in PSD3 for the future of this country.
Sure.
Unless something in the way of, if you have a bank account, you have to have a digital identity within the bank account. Could be a way around that, but I think just to have a digital identity in order to be able to do anything, it's going to meet resistance here. I know.
Well, your passport's a digital
Yeah,
identity,
it is,
and your driving license is often used as a proxy.
It is, but for the UK tax law, everybody, if you pay tax in the UK, you actually have a digital identity number that is merely linked to your national insurance number and your tax commitments.
It's not connected.
But it's not connected to banking, and it's not something you can freely use.
Sure.
I think there will be.
So there's a roadblock there.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be something that.
That's not something we can
That's
speculate on.
So with a computer algorithm.
I'm just saying, if Europe goes with PSD3, then eventually they're going to catch up and pull ahead with a lot of these opportunities. It's just,
That may be
I
true.
see it.
Yeah.
That may indeed be
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
It's a
see that.
Brexit dividend, that's what it is.
I can see that possibly happening because, as I said, they are doing that in Germany already and in Nordics as well. It's not just Germany, the whole that part of the world. They're quite used to having ID cards, basically, which as you said, is an anathema to this country.
Yeah, I think maybe Europe is a little more liberal than the UK.
Well, I think, yeah, it's not really about being liberal. It's about accepting that the compromise that you basically need this card because it makes your life easier. And they're not so hung up on the thing, the principle that we have here. It's a different mindset.
For sure, all of this flow of consent, validations that, behind the scenes looks quite simple will be even more complicated.
Yeah.
Or less complicated if you have a single entity that holds all the personal information and consent. So yeah, but still, overall, I think in terms of process, there's still a lot to be explored, I would say.
Oh, it's definitely.
Yeah.
It's like a confidence curve in that. So before you use the identity, then the consumer has to be trusting the identity without worrying about privacy. But I think it works in Asia, but in UK, it's not in this tax program.
Yeah, Singapore and Asian countries have ID cards as well. And so there's obviously Hong Kong will, whether they like it or not. But I mean, in Japan, they've all got ID cards. The whole of Asia's
It's
got
funny
ID
how
cards.
the historical and the cultural antecedents really drive some of the technical sort of possibility.
But as Guy elaborated, ID and consent is just one tiny element in the
web.
the devilishly complicated and, as Guy said, fiendishly complicated things that need to happen in order to be able to just create an open banking platform. So, talk to succeed in it.
It's an exciting journey.
Yeah, and I think this module is quite a good piece of work. As I'm sure our colleague here we work with from Consensus.
Consensus, yeah.
Sorry, Consensus would agree. Yeah. So and yeah, next stop is open insurance, I think. Yeah.
Well, pensions are coming first here in the UK. Pensions are next and then insurance.
Oh, really?
In the open finance
Okay.
journey.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
It depends. In Brazil, it started with insurance first. Yeah, different countries are taking different routes. So
Brazil's a young country. They don't need pensions yet. It's only the old farts in the UK that need pensions.
The average age.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Guy, very much indeed.
That's okay. I hope it was illustrative of what we can do, and you got some food for thought in terms of how you might implement open banking, because it's not a simple job.